What is up, guys? We are actually perfectly on time. I think I timed that exactly perfect. That was pretty cool. It's pretty hard to time that, so I'm pretty excited. We're here with Justin, who just left us, so he didn't want to be perfectly on time, I guess. And we have Kanga here, which is from Audio System Specialist. You see him a lot on Instagram. He's also got a YouTube channel that he's going to talk about today. But we're super excited to be here with you guys. So, guys, why don't you guys say hi?
Hey, what's going on? You having a good day?
Yeah, it's been a good day. It's nice to be here. Thanks for the invite, guys.
Oh, yeah. Actually, Justin didn't want you on. I said that we were going to have
Oh,
you
come
on.
on now. That's not Hang on
Like,
now.
Out on a coin toss? Okay.
Justin said, "Oh, fine." He lost a bet. So.
I'm all for it. Guests are always interesting because sometimes when it's just Nick and I don't know if we're as entertaining as we could be. So, Kanga, tell us who the heck are you exactly? Who is Kanga? What is it you do? We want to know the story about you. Tell us all about you.
We do.
How did you get here on the live stream with us?
Very persistent and annoying in comments, so people will just accept me on and be like, "Well, we need to have him have his say, and then maybe he'll go away."
That's exactly what we said.
Yeah. Well, my story is interesting. Where I've been interested in audio for 27 years. I am a Southern Ontario local, so as many people will know, there's a lot of brands and a lot of technology that came out of this area. I did work for one brand that's in this area, which I won't name. There's a long story there, but I did work inside and got to see how things were made and the process and all that stuff. But my interest in audio has been long-lived, and I just felt like being more of a community kind of person. And I've just been at it more seriously for the last 2 years. And comment sections, I'm pretty fluid in comment sections. So being a guest or hosting, I'm still dabbling. But that's how I got here.
The cool thing is too, you guys, you can go ahead and check out. I added some links in the, basically channel description, I guess video description, and it has all links to his YouTube channel, Instagram, and all that stuff. And he has some pretty cool reviews, basically on like the Sanos Fabers. The Monolith, which we were talking about earlier, that's by Monoprice. If you guys aren't familiar with that, he even does some Bowers and Wilkins stuff and a lot of really cool things going on. And I found it exciting because Kanga can give us more of the background on some of the consumer side of speakers versus the DIY, so commercial versus DIY. And I think we're gonna spend a lot of time dissecting that tonight. What are some of the differences, good and bad? Because I think there's differences that are good and bad on both sides. I think there's some things that we were talking about beforehand that commercial does much better than DIY, and some things that we feel like DIY can also be much better than commercial. So we'll be talking about that. Whoa, you're even in the chat, man. You're a multifunctional guy. Got everything going on, Kanga.
I'm logged in
So
everywhere.
you said Ontario. You're in Canada. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. Toronto, Canada.
Awesome.
Which is basically the United States.
Yeah, it's I'm at a latitude on the map lower than some of the western part of the states, so I'm below that 48.
I've been to Toronto once. It was kind of cool. The one thing that, for those that aren't Canadian, that I found interesting is a lot of the signs were in English and French, and I was like, oh. That's weird. I have no idea what it says in French, but I'm assuming it's whatever it was in English.
I've been to Toronto. It was a long time ago, so it seemed like a really nice place.
Yeah, it's nice when it's not like buried in snow, and we don't get a lot of it. They get more out west and colder temperatures, and out east where my family is, they get really, really buried in snow.
Ooh.
Toronto's kind of cheating. That's why they don't like us.
That's a good thing. All right, so let's go ahead and get into this. Let's go ahead and start talking a little bit about, commercial speakers versus DIY. One of the things that we talked about in the beginning, I think we should spend some time talking about right now, is form and function. So one of the things that I said, and this is my belief, and I think, Justin, you backed this up too, and you can tell me if you didn't, is that I believe DIY often does function over form. What do you think about that?
Yes, but probably because it's hard to make things look good. It's easier to make things work than it is to make them look good.
Well, Kanga, what do you think, man?
It can work, but at what level is it working? You see, like when you get into taste and preference with, sure, you can have a 2-inch woofer full range make sound, but how good is the sound? I mean, I've heard lots of Bluetooth speakers blaring on the bus, and everybody's phone makes sound. It's got stereo speakers coming out of it. And those guys that can't afford headphones, even at $15, blast their phone when they're walking around. It makes sound, but really in the audio thing, it's a matter of how good do you want it to sound, or what kind of sound are you looking to create when you make something.
Well, and I think it's interesting too, because when you look at a lot of the high-end speaker manufacturers, you'll notice that they're not just a box, right? So almost every time when we look at a lot of DIY speakers, their basic function or form, I should say, is a rectangular box. One of the guys I think does a really good job is Tom Zarbo. He does Zarbo Audio. It's here on, I think it's Zarbo Audio Project. It's on YouTube. Really cool guy. And the very first time I saw one of his DIY speakers, that was really interesting because he had curved it. And I said to him, well, man, that's really cool that you curved that. How did you do it? And he goes, you know what? It's actually better to curve than not. I said, well, what do you mean by that? And he goes, well, when you curve it, think of it just like the outside of a car door. He said you have a lot more strength in the curve, so you can actually use less material, lighter material, make the speaker lighter, and yet it still be stronger and have a much cooler design. And I'd say that that's something that a lot of DIY guys don't do. We're more in the square rectangular style box, where manufacturers, higher end manufacturers, start doing some of those cooler designs where you look at like the curved speakers, or what is it? Is it B&W that does the Nautilus, right? The B&W Nautilus speaker that looks so cool.
That one and the 800 series are both curved, but the Nautilus is formed different, where the 800 series is like layers of wood that are bent around a form and then glued into shape. A lot of them do that. So let's take like,
Nick, now that you say that the DIY is more form over function, more making a speaker sound good than more function over form, I'm going to have to disagree with you, because I mean, before I started my YouTube channel, I spent years browsing forums of various types, and you go to the Tech Talk forums on Parts Express, and you see people curving speakers. I think about, if you know the story behind the Car Audio Fabrication YouTube channel, his first real video was how to curve cut wood, because he was making ports that were curved. And his story was he was active on some forum, and he made the video and put it on the forum, and it got a bunch of, it kind of blew up on the forum. And so he's all like, okay, I'm in, let's do YouTube videos. And so, you know what? I see a lot of DIYers that are making stuff that's just absolutely insane. I don't have that kind of skill. I don't have the space to have I don't have a dedicated 2-car garage that's just where I can leave something in a frame so it can set up for a couple of days. I'm terrible with paint. I'm not good at making a finished project look good. Evidence to that is Hi-Fi Vega put stickers on a boombox. Everyone said it looked better than mine.
So wait, I'm gonna stop you for a second, because I think you're right and wrong all at once. So
I'm right and right all at once.
So I'm going to tell you why I think you're wrong in some. I think you're absolutely right. There's some really talented DIYers that do that. But I would say the majority of DIYers have to take a box that someone else has either built or around dimensions that they've built. They're using a design that's already been designed, and they take a box, and so it's going to come out whatever it was designed as. And most people that are designing speakers aren't going to design a curved type speaker, because a lot of people don't have the tools to be able to do that.
That's the tricky part. When I moved into my apartment, I had a plan for my home theater. I always decorate something. Like, my room is covered in curtains, blackout curtains. That's how I get away with my acoustics. And I like a dead room because I want to hear what the speakers are doing. I don't want to hear really what the room has to tell me. And the room is influencing on the bass and lower frequencies for sure. But I like taking out everything else so I can get really good directivity from surround sound, because I play games. In games, I want to know where enemies are coming from so I can like turn around and be like, gotcha. Like, so I don't need my room giving me false information. So I deaden everything. All that black in the background there, you see the little light that I have? It's all curtain. So I had a vision of what I wanted to do, and getting to that point, I had to figure out where everything was going to go, what I was going to buy, that kind of thing. So having that vision ahead of time helped me pick like which products I was going to get to, and like where I was going to put it, that kind of thing. Yeah, really, that being able to see what you're going to do ahead of time helps. So I went and bought tools like a jigsaw and a circular saw and like all these different kinds of tools that were going to help me build what I wanted to put in the space. It's part of the investment in my system was building the system. So I bought tools ahead of time.
Well, and I think that's another interesting thing, because when you are doing DIY, one of the things I do like about DIY is if you get really good at it and you start designing your own crossovers or do DSP or whatever, you can really make your speakers designed around your room versus just speakers that are designed for any room. And I think that's another place where DIY has it over your commercial grade speaker. Even though I like commercial grades, there's a lot of commercial grade speakers I like. So anyone that doesn't think I don't like commercial grade speakers is crazy. There's a lot. In fact, I own commercial grade speakers. I used to have, I really like Definitive Technology, even though they're not everyone's favorite, but I just like the bass end on that. They're not hi-fi speakers, but they're cool. I gave mine away. But there's a ton of speakers that I really, really enjoy and really appreciate. But I think there's good points to each of them. But a commercial grade speaker is going to have to design a speaker around basically an average room. And that's not everyone's room.
And it's got to look good to the average person.
That's a good point. Well, yeah.
They're commercial grade. I don't want to name drop a designer, but anybody that sees a speaker that's got his name on it,
you can drop the name. It's all right. No one's going to get mad at you.
Andrew Jones.
Oh yeah, sure.
He designs to a market that's like broad spectrum. You want to hit as many people or listeners, you know what I mean? Like, so your swatch or whatever you're making is going to hit like a big chunk of the general market, which is smart for business. But if that's not your sound as a do-it-yourself guy, you can tweak. You can look at how, like, what I've done is imagined. I'll look at speakers that are made by some brands, and I'll look at it and go, well, I wish it was like this, and then I wish it was like that. And then if I did it differently, I would take the drivers and the crossover out, build a new cabinet, and throw, you know what I mean?
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because it is true. For DSP is kind of helping this out a little, but there's a lot of times where you'll get on a forum and you'll ask people's opinions on these speakers that you want to buy, and you'll buy them, and then you'll get them home and you just hate them because they're just not right for your space. There's nothing wrong with that, but you're stuck with those now. That's what you got. And once again, that's where, if you know kind of what you're doing with your own DIY speakers, you can attenuate the high end some if your room is really bright, or if you're having a boomy region, maybe you can take that out. And like I said, DSP has allowed us to really do a lot of that without having to do that, like room correction. None of them are perfect, but they're a lot better than what people had to go with before.
Yeah, I think that what's going on with DSP is really, it's creative. It's probably one portion of the future. I think for doing near field 2-channel like desktop, there's tons of powered speakers that have DSP in them, but they're set by the companies inside, so they're not changeable. They just tune them based on whatever the drivers can or can't do, and they DSP whatever they can't engineer. To engineer the acoustics properly in the cabinet and the drivers themselves probably costs a lot more than tweaking it in DSP. So DSP is almost like cheat codes. So there are two different minds to that, but it makes me wonder. I've never heard. There's a Buchard Audio is one of these brands that's got models that are acoustic and then DSP controlled, and I'm wondering. I've never A/B tested a speaker design that's acoustic drivers only with passive crossover, and then a DSP speaker that's exactly the same settings. And what they perform like, what's going on there. I've never done that, but I'm always curious about what these changes bring to the audio experience, whether you're doing it yourself or if it's commercial. It's aiming to achieve some sort of clarity of audio, but I'm wondering what these changes make, like what difference they make. It's hard to even demo them, like especially the last couple of years. It's almost been impossible.
Absolutely. Well, I wanted to talk to Justin about this because this is something that I think Justin and I kind of talked about too. Thank you, True Voice of Reason. He said, you know what? Thank you. I used Exohide for the first time, which I'm going to talk about later because I think that it kind of comes into this. Exohide is kind of like Duratex. It's almost like a bed liner that goes on speakers. Makes it really tough, hard. And it's good for like home theater. It's not very reflective or anything of that nature. So good for home theater, good for speakers that you're going to be moving around. A lot of people use it for like PA style speakers and things. It's my first time using Exohide. And I got to say, a little goes a long way. It's really good stuff.
Yeah.
But Justin, I want to ask you this question. All right, we talked about this, and I think it was Ryan who was on there that was talking about Aaron, who talked about, hey, how there's some speakers that have a lot of resonance issues because of cheaping out on bracing. So,
yes,
what do you think? Because there's some commercial grade speakers like B&W, for example, that do a great job on bracing. But what do you think about, like, at least on the low end of speakers, bracing versus DIY?
You know what's funny? Have you ever taken like I don't know, feel like Sony's made them, Panasonic has made them. Everyone's made these inexpensive kind of, you had them when you were in high school, plastic speakers. You crack those open, you look at what's inside them, and you're just like, wow, these things really aren't built well at all, right? You get in there, and if there's a crossover at all, it's just a cap on the tweeter. If there's a tweeter at all, it's usually just like a fake, it's just there as a fake, right? It looks like a tweeter, but it's not. And I think that what you've got to remember about a commercial speaker is you've got to build it to a price point. Even a high-end brand is still building to a price point. It's all part of the marketing strategy. And so bracing costs money, and bracing is heavy, and so you have to ship it. And so I can see how a commercial speaker won't have much bracing in it. And when I think about the few that I've taken apart, I don't find much bracing in any of them. Even a simple shelf brace, which doesn't weigh very much, but you think about it's one more piece to design, right? It's one more piece to mill and machine. And if you're just building speakers out in your, in your backyard and you've got time to work on it, sure, you can put proper bracing in it. So I can see why you don't see the kind of bracing as you should have. But then again, if you're talking about $500,000 speakers, a speaker for $1,000, okay, we can brace that sucker and we can pay to ship it. You've got plenty of overhead in it because the parts aren't $1,000.
Yeah.
Kanga, what do you think, man?
I've seen, I can't talk about exactly how it's done, but because I was, NDA.
Sure.
But I've seen some bracing done in interesting ways. There's cross sections of some of the newest models out there where they have like these, it's basically just whatever shape your box is, you do a rectangle of it with holes cut out of it, and that's your internal bracing.
Like
I've also seen DIYers use like a dowel, so it's just one stick. When engineering or R&D does modeling, they do simulated modeling of the cabinet flexing, and they position the bracing where the cabinet's flexing the most. That's something you, like if you're do it yourself, you can actually attach, I think, an accelerometer to REW, and you can measure the cabinet in different places using an accelerometer. If you want to really nail down your resonances, you build 3 or 4 boxes and do your own R&D, but that gets expensive. But what I was going to say in chat, someone said something about DIYers can have their own drivers made. Yeah, but you're getting 1 or 2 made at cost rather than having like 5,000 made. So you're paying way more per item rather than bulk buying.
No, and I think you're right. And I think that's one of the other areas where DIY and commercial are different. Like when Andrew Jones designs a speaker, as long as it's within reason, he has those drivers designed for that speaker. It's not like he has that driver designed for, all the speakers that anyone can build. It's like literally just for that design. And with DIYers, you have to find the right driver that works well within the specs that you want to create the speaker for. And that's That's true. And I would say also with DIY, a lot of people, I like Aaron. I'm starting to do some of this too, but testing of drivers has become one of those things that people don't really know about. Like a driver's a driver, but there are differences with distortion. There's differences in linearities. There's a lot of differences that you wouldn't know necessarily just by picking out a driver at Parts Express.
Yeah, the Q factors and the spec sheet doesn't tell you what the driver performs like, what it's actually doing, and that's something I'm really interested in. Where some of the really really high end stuff, they're using a cryogenic process in their material development to align the align the structure and the metal all in the same direction. And it gets really really expensive. But I'm wondering, in this diminishing returns aspect, how much more audio experience are you really getting from going to that length to, to like you're cryogenically freezing your metal parts into, they're beautiful speakers, absolutely stunning looking speakers. But I'm wondering really, like, how far do we really want to go? Like,
Well, I think you're right. And I think that's where, me and Justin have had this conversation a couple weeks ago. Remember this, Justin, where we talked about how, especially if we're looking at like the lower end, even so we're not looking at like really the real boutique speakers. A lot of the speakers you can DIY and get similar quality, if not better, for cheaper, because they have taken a lot of shortcuts, right? Where the bracing is gone, the drivers are subpar, but their return is huge. I know when I worked for a company that we got the the full speakers at cost. I bought a $3,500 sound system. This is include powered sub, 12-inch powered sub at the time. And the towers had dual 8 inches. I got them for like $150 shipped to my door, all of them, full 5.1. So you can tell that, that there wasn't any money in that stuff. Now,
yeah,
like you said, you get a lot bigger discount if you buy like 1,000 or 10,000 drivers versus, one.
Yep. Yeah, I've seen some of the markup. And it's everybody in the chain of sales gets a little piece, and that's why it ends up being so expensive. But yeah, the discounts when you're that close to the source, I miss that. looking at
Well, that's
looking
one
at
thing
the prices
too. I mean,
out
it's
there where
it can be difficult to build a DIY speaker for less than what you could have just bought a similar speaker for that reason. Because if I buy it from Parts Express, well, Parts Express is going to mark that up. And I was looking at the chat, and some people in the chat were talking about bracing, and I'm gonna throw out an unpopular opinion about bracing. I think the strongest part of the box is the corner. That's the part that has the least flex, where the joints come together.
Correct.
And I see that a lot of people, when they build their, especially subwoofer enclosures, like putting those corner 45s in. I think they're just there for looks. I don't think they actually do any good. I think if you actually want to properly brace a speaker enclosure, the braces need to go in the middle. And then the big mistake people make is they make their brace in a symmetric location. So the idea behind a brace is to cut down on the audible panel resonance. So that panel's moving and it's making some noise. You put a brace right in the middle. Now you have two panels that are the exact same size, and it's resonating at a different frequency, but now you got two resonating at the same frequency. So what you want is to offset that brace. So instead of putting it in the middle of the enclosure, put it a 2/3 offset or a 1/3 offset, depending on which direction your thirds are. That way you've got two different panels vibrating at a different frequency, and they're not going to add to each other to color the sound at that one spot. And I'm just looking at all these bracing I see, all these corner braces, and I'm scratching my head going, I don't know. The only time you want to if corner bracing was as important as everyone seems to think it is, why is it we don't brace every corner with a 45? They're not all 45.
You're right. And Kanga agrees.
Just the ones that are easy to brace.
But yeah, I wanted to add something to it though.
No, okay. you add something, then I'll add something. You do your thing.
Okay. I see the idea of doing 45s if you're doing like a vented enclosure, and you're 45ing on the inside of the vent because you want the air to flow in a
airflow
natural. So that's okay, especially if you're doing a T-line. The other thing too is if you do asymmetrical bracing, it works the same way when you look at models being built where the tweeter is not right above the woofer.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why they're putting the tweeter in a different place is because of edge diffraction around the cabinet. They offset it so the frequency on one side or the other side, the wavelengths between the left and the right side of the tweeter are not coupled, doing exactly what you explained, where both sides of the tweeter now, the diffraction edges and the top of the cabinet, are not all adding to this additional noise.
The worst thing you can do. Go ahead. Sorry.
I'm going to break it. Which has advantages and disadvantages, right? Because that's one of the things that, this is one of the things that if you're a DIYer, you can decide on this, because the advantage is less diffraction. The disadvantage, because now if you have 3 different lengths it's going at, well, 4 really, because you have the rear, but you don't have to worry about that one. So let's just assume it's off center, and the top is different from the right, and the right and left, and from the left. So they're all 3 different dimensions. That's going to give you 3 different places where it's going to diffract. And if they were all directly in the center, they're going to all diffract at the same time, creating a huge diffraction versus less, which is a huge advantage there. However, the disadvantage is your off-axis response, because your off-axis response one way is going to be good, and then the other way is going to be poor. So you almost have to ask yourself, well, what are you building or designing the speaker for? Are you designing it for a multi-room system, or are you designing it for like a single seat? Like if you're designing it for like really like a single seat, offset your tweeter all day long. If you're designing them like right here at bookshelves, right here at your desk or something, bam, definitely offset. If you're building them to fill up like a home theater, skip. But make the top different than the sides. At least do that.
At least the top and the sides are different. If you go left and right, because our ears are positioned a certain way, unless you have ears that are different. I'm not assuming anybody's ear orientation here. there might be some owls listening. I don't know. I mean, I don't want to count anybody out here. But funny. Because of the left and right, that's why all of our perspective in listening and audio is always across this horizontal plane. We almost ignore the above unless you're one of these like Oral 3D people, which is cool. I like them too. Oral's got its race going right now. But yeah, that sensitivity, why you look at any design and that symmetry is different because of that reason. And the other thing I mentioned, I saw something in chat about DIY and like rounding. It made me think of like the way that corners and edges are beveled around cabinets, not always around the woofers because the wavelength is longer, but around the tweeter mid-range or on the top of the cabinet. They have these bevels or cuts where your diffraction is less. So if you're going to do a symmetrical design for on and off axis horizontally, you bevel the edges around them over, and then you don't get that kind of effect. You don't have to work. So you get the best of both worlds doing rounded or beveled edges. And again, if DIY, you need to have the tools to do that.
Yeah, and that's something that we need to maybe do a video on sometime, because it also depends at how big of a bevel we're doing and how much that affects it. Just a small little bevel is not going to really have much effect at all. But you're right. You're absolutely right. And there are different things that you can do if you're doing DIY. And there's certain things that the commercial manufacturer is already taken care of, so you don't even have to worry about that type of thing. Well, you do sometimes. That's a good point, though. If you're looking for a commercial grade speaker and you notice that the tweeter has the exact same distance from the top, left, and right, don't buy it. Because if they didn't get that right, then the rest of it's probably not right either.
Yeah, I think that's just to kind of hammer that point home. It's a little different for subwoofers because the wavelengths are a different size. But if we're talking about just a bookshelf speaker, the worst thing you can do is take a piece of 6-inch PVC pipe and mount like a 2-inch driver in the dead center of that, right? Just, put a cap on the PVC and mount the driver in the cap. Because at that one frequency, that is the length of that baffle, you'll get that weird diffraction. You'll get a big spike in the sound right there. The next worst thing is a square where you're the same distance, right in the middle of a square. And so you want the speaker to be longer. You want the tweeter to be offset. You do all this so you don't have these weird reflections that happen all at the same time. The weird reflections are going to happen coming off the baffle. You just don't want them all at the exact same frequency, because then it really does mess things up.
Yeah, it just amplifies the problem. Mm-hmm. Basically,
yeah, it has the
same thing with the bracing, right? Your bracing is offset, so you don't change the frequency but make the frequency louder.
It'd basically be a Bose cube. I mean, whoops, did I say that?
Well,
Which
that's
is
one of the reasons why they have like curved cabinets where your internal reflection angles are always different. And the rigidity of the curve actually reinforces the cabinet wall, so you don't have the same resonance problem. You'll still want to do like vertical, or horizontal like rib bracing in certain points, depending on where your woofers are, because it's more energy in those places. But that's why the cabinet shape is a lot of the shapes of the cabinet and position of drivers is to account for these wavelengths and resonant frequencies. So unless you're testing for it, you can use the math of just the math of wavelengths and frequency effect on the cabinet, and then design around those. I mean, you could just measure like, oh, I want my speakers to be this size and throw drivers in it. That's one thing, but you can actually do the math and all that stuff to figure out where everything can go as well using wavelength. Oh,
so I thought
B&W.
Yeah, they do a really good job with their bracing. Every one of theirs is a little bit different, but they always go with those curved sides like you're talking about.
Yeah.
Well, all the ones that I can think of off the top of my head, I should say, go with those curved sides, and then they don't cheap out. Like, these things are heavy. I do believe though, as B&W, they got bought out, or are they going out of business?
Yeah,
or
they did. They got bought out by Sound United a while ago, and
That's right,
Sound
Sound
United
United.
just got bought out by somebody else.
Yeah, they got bought out by a medical company.
Yeah. So all the people in the hospital have better sound to listen to when they're waiting.
I know. I thought that was crazy when I saw it. Yeah, see, like, we as DIYers, we don't have the ability to do that. Now, we can do that.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of people do ratchet straps and do it like that, but you have to do one at a time. You can't do,
There's
this
a company
is nice.
that sells the forms, the aluminum forms. You can just give them a measurement, and that's the beveled edge thing that I was talking about.
Oh yeah,
Just an
I'm sorry.
example. That's a really good company too. I love their designs.
Yeah, they did the beveled edge, and you see like how it's at different angles, which is nice. And it looks like they use a Purify woofer.
Yep. I think it's a passive on the side. I'm not 100%. But
So
yeah, they have some really nice stuff. They have a tower that looks like that too. It's amazing.
I'm gonna mention this real quick. I can't pronounce your name. I'm sorry. Baratra. I don't know. So anyway, just what I would do if I were you, go to the forum, and that's the perfect place to talk about this, is go to the forum. Go to toidsdiyaudio.com/forums. Write that it's in the link it's linked in the description of the video, and ask those types of questions, because you'll be able to get more concrete answers there, and we're going to be able to show you examples where we're not going to be able to on air. We're not going to be able to do that. I do. I like this, and I like the wood and the white, and it looks like it looks like it's at an angle too, right? Angled up.
Yep.
Are those near field
the,
monitors?
the platform that it's on has got feet on the front that angle it up and down a little bit, so it is time aligned by using their base to time align the drivers, because the depth of the tweeter is a little, like the way the horn is a little bit further back, so they're tilting the tweeter back to be more aligned with the mid.
And I think that's what you notice in some of the higher end commercial ones, is that they take a higher end approach. It doesn't look like just a normal speaker. They have what we would call advanced techniques.
Yeah, I have a couple examples here if I can just scroll through them.
Yeah, go ahead.
If you guys recognize.
Yeah, that's Dvorak.
Wow.
Dvorak
What is
Fidelity.
that?
Yeah, and a lot of his smaller ones, he'll have the tweeter will be off to one side, but they're pretty gorgeous. I mean, to get a finish like that, that's the other thing too, is you're paying for like that finish. You buy how many sheets in bulk, and then you can put it on however many models you're making. So you get like all of your parts are done in, like, you get many more parts per dollar when you're doing multiple cabinets. So your price to do it yourself, even if you copied it like one for one, it would still cost you more because they're paying less per piece.
You're right. And it's funny. I was looking at the Spatial Audio M3s, and they're open baffle speakers, not much going into them as far as material. But for just a basic satin finish, it's $5,500. If you want a gloss finish, you add an additional $1,500 to it for the pair. So it's a lot of work. Now, at DIY, if you want that, you can work at it and do it, and it doesn't matter really the length it takes you. But if you want someone else to do it, you're going to pay the money to get it done.
Yeah. Yeah. Finish is a big deal, especially if you want it like really good quality. I mean, with the brand that I work for, they have like, it's a massive paint shop, massive like wood shop, paint shop, all in, and the curing time for some of the high end stuff is multiple layers over multiple days, and buffing and robotics to get the finish exact. Like they have a lot of stuff going on. Even with Sonus Faber, which I'm a really big fan of with their philosophy, their naming, their, I love pizza, stuff like that. It all rolls together. So now that their wood shop, they're able to do so many of these really great finishes and really great stains and all that stuff. And they spend a lot of time doing it's almost like furniture that makes sound at that level. Like, I know a lot of people that pay a lot for an expensive couch or furniture, way more than their audio. But when you're at that level, you want it to be as visually stunning as well as sounding. So, I mean, kudos to them. If you're at that level, then.
Yeah, no, and I think Justin said it earlier. If you're not at that level, you just put stickers on it.
So, I look at something like this and I think the talk about the paint shop, the time for curing. One thing I find myself doing, it was whenever I'm making anything, it's like, okay, I got to get this done so I can make the video, and time to paint and sand and paint and sand and paint and sand. It's just not there. But this right here is pretty sick. How in the world did they make those shapes?
Yeah, I have not reached out to them. I did ask another company, I think I mentioned in chat a couple of weeks ago. I talked about Vivid Audio, who Lawrence Dickey is the designer of the Nautilus speaker for B&W. So I think those are a molded speaker. They mold some of the shapes, and then they combine them somehow. These, I think, are like a synthetic marble that are the same kind of idea. They're molded molded in halves probably, and then joined somehow, and then finished, because you can't see any seams, obviously. But
so we were talking about this a couple weeks ago. Well, actually, I was talking about it with a bunch of people. I did a video basically just showing you how much money go into the parts that go into Bonic EW5, which is nothing. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it was like $300 worth of parts, if that. It was very, very inexpensive. Having said that, the cabinet's where it's at. And so with CNC, a lot of people are now getting to the point where they can actually start CNCing a bunch of different layers together and then sandwiching them together to make one big speaker and get really cool designs, which you can do. I like the idea of this, because you could probably do the same thing with something like that and a lot of sanding.
yeah. I mean, they're the drivers you can just get. You can. I think that just about anybody could buy the drivers that are in these cabinets, but try to make those cabinets. I mean, they're 330 pounds a piece, 6 feet tall, $195,000 pair.
So I'm gonna add this to the stream real quick, because this is not a perfect finish. It's not a great finish. This is what we call Exohide. Same thing as Duratex. If you guys are, this is my first time using the Exohide. I've never used it before. I just used it today for the first time. I got to say, it dries really fast, goes on really easy. I did use the right roller for it. But if you're not great at finishing, this is something you can do at DIY that's very easy to do. Now, that's not going to say it's going to cover up all your mistakes. You still want to sand it down nice and everything before you put this on. But I would say, especially if you're doing like a home theater style speaker where you don't care about the look so much, that's a good idea. Or stickers is greater than Exohide.
Yeah, vinyl. Buy some vinyl off of Amazon that's the right width or whatever, and go at it that way. I thought about doing the same thing, and I wanted to get a friend of mine to do like an anime mural of some kind up the one side of the tower. Like if I had space to move around my tower, or they're towed in or whatever, and you could see the outside panel, then you could do like a mural of some kind over the one side of the cabinet, especially if you're either doing it yourself or it's really low budget. And it's like there's one aspect, at least in home audio anyways, you have this like resell type of mentality in your mind. Like you buy it, but you don't want to do anything to it and make it custom or change it or ruin it, because just in case you want to sell it and then move on, if it's not original, then you've just ruined the price or the cost, or you know what I mean? You own it at that point. So there's some of that going on with some, but you know, if you're in audio, you might as well have fun. If you're not having really fun with what's going on, you're like part of the whole experience is missing if you're holding back a little bit there. You know, you want to make it custom. You want to enjoy it and embrace that and put some silly colors on them or something.
No, and someone had mentioned that Duratex can be tinted, and they're right. Duratex and Exohide can be tinted. You buy the white version of it, and then you tint it to whatever color you want. There's one thing. Well, go and show Wilson Audio. Do you want to show, or who do you want to show next?
This is, I just noticed this today. They just launched this as their new subwoofer, and it's like 10 grand.
Wow. It looks pretty basic.
I just wanted to talk about it real quick.
10,000 for what's going on that makes it worth 10 grand? That's
what I want to know. I mean, I have a lot of respect for what Wilson does, and there are like other speakers that have like multiple angle changes, and there's tons of different stuff that goes into their crossovers. Like I respect that part of it, but do you guys see what I see around the front of the woofer there?
Yeah, they're just
like they're magnets, aren't they? Grills on a $10,000 sub.
Are you sure it's push pin? Are you sure that's not magnet?
Well,
either way, you can hide the magnet.
Yeah, and then
so it's.
I don't know. I mean, it is new and it's been talked about. It's been in the. I just wanted to bring it in just because Wilson Audio is known for extremely expensive speakers and high end at their.
It does appear to have DSP because it looks like there's a USB on the back. Yeah.
And what's going on with the side of that cabinet? There's like there's an interesting relief built into it. Yeah. Is that just paint or is that an actual physical feature there?
That's probably like a differentiated thickness of the cabinet, so it's thicker at the front, and they probably CNC'd that out of something.
Right.
I don't know for sure, but it is a feature
it looks nice, but I mean 10,000, that's a lot of money. You can buy a lot of things for $10,000 that
yeah, I'd rather have a different car than a sub. So
can you get a car for 10,000 these days?
It's getting harder, isn't it? Well, you can fill up a gas tank, maybe.
You could buy a couple of cars for that much, depending on what kind of level of car you're getting.
Justin, did you have something you wanted to say, man? I cut you off.
I did earlier, but I forgot what it was.
So I want to talk about connectors because it's one thing that we haven't talked about. We only got about, 15, 20 minutes left or whatever. But the one thing that I do like about DIY over commercial typically is you get to choose the connectors you want. Now, almost always on commercial speakers, you get binding posts. And I like binding posts. But when you start doing like really big projects, like I'm working on that JTR one, I like to use these type of connectors, which we talked about ahead of time. These are speak-on connectors. This goes on the speaker itself. And then this would be what plugs up to the speaker wire. And the cool thing about these, I got links to these, is when you put them together, you twist it and it locks. You can't take it off. And so when you're working with like a lot of really heavy bass, like your subwoofers, when I'm working with like JTRs, things like that, I like to put these on there. That's something that you're not going to find on a lot of commercial grade speakers unless you're talking about PA style speakers. And then even then it's almost always XLR. And I like these better than XLR personally.
I don't know. Have you had a lot of problems with your speaker wires coming loose on your stuff?
Well, if you get a really good pressurized room, and depending on how good your binding posts are and depending on how good your banana plugs are, yeah, you can have issues. I've had them actually bounce and touch together if they're not insulated and actually, put the receiver on protect mode. So yeah, you can, but with this type of thing, this is pretty solid plastic. And so you're not, when you cut out the back of the speaker, when you're cutting out like a square or even a circle, that's going to be now the place that's going to resonate the most or have the greatest loss. So this doesn't have any loss either. So when you're putting it in a subwoofer, you really shouldn't have any cabinet loss when you put this on there, and then you can just twist it on. It's a good connector. And I gotta say, and it locks. You have to unlock it to take it off. Otherwise, it's on there for good. So yeah, especially if you put something like behind an acoustically transparent screen, you never want to go back there again. You just don't want to.
Can you put the connector up closer to the camera so we can get a better look at it? I'm kind of curious as to how you wire it up.
Are you talking about this? Yeah, let me get some light on it. Like this is so the backside is 4 wires. It's got +1, +1, -1, +2, -2. So you could do it for like bi wiring or things of that nature.
Gotcha.
And then this untwists. How it works. This is a cheaper brand. I usually use Nutric, but this one I'm using. This goes around your speaker wire, like this.
Yeah.
And then it goes in here. And when you go in here and you start tightening it, it compresses this to lock on to the speaker wire. So the speaker wire won't come out. And on here, it has screw terminals, which you can't really see because I don't have any like. What? Oh, there we go. Screen. Yeah, let's do that. Much better. So you unscrew those to and you put the speaker wire in there, screwed in, and they'll never come out. I've never had speaker wire come out of these before, and I've never had one of these come off. So on the MX-15, this is what I use. My buddy's 15s that I built for him, this is what I use. I'd love to see these used in car audio, although it'll probably never gain traction.
Yeah,
I like them.
The terminals that are in car audio, I've seen a lot of different really rough looking terminals. I've seen some fancy ones too. They're pretty general, but yeah, this is pretty I guess it's because it sticks out like away from the cabinet depending on where you're connecting them.
That's a good point.
If you want your cables, your box maximized in a space and you got to move it in, you can't reach in and connect a cable that sticks out unless you make like a recess or like they have a speak on like cup where it's on an angle, right? So like the whole terminal you push into it like it's hard to say, but yeah.
I know what you mean. I'm gonna mention this with Jason. He's right. Nutric is like kind of the #1 band, but I bought these. These are like a less expensive one because I wanted to know how good they were. I haven't used them yet, but off the top of my head, the actual body quality is the same. The only thing that I think is cheaper is the insert that connects around the speaker wire. It seems a little more flexible, not as rigid. I'm not concerned about that.
I pulled them up, and they're not that much more expensive than a lot of terminal cups that are out there. So I'm thinking this might be the way to go. I'm gonna explore these. I think for future builds. I like the looks of that. If you look at how much terminal cups cost these days,
it's true. You could almost make a trip to the supermarket with as much as they cost. Let's gas that now. I hear in some places in Illinois it's almost like $5 a gallon now.
Yeah, I saw up here it's a gallon is 4 liters. Up here I saw $1.83, $1.83.7 per liter. So times 4, so it's way more than 5 a gallon.
Wow.
Crazy.
So here's Kanga. What do you think about spring clips on this? If you find spring clips on any brand speaker or back of a receiver, what do you think typically?
Reminds me of terminals I used to buy at Radio Shack.
I used to have
the stereo. Yeah, I should revealed my age. I used to have this little stereo that I actually out of the battery, the boom boxes you could carry around. I cut a little terminal hole out of the battery door and then stuck these terminals out and then wired the internal wires from the speakers inside the boombox so I could play external speakers. Parallel connection. And that's where it reminds me is push spring terminals. And I know that what are those not Ultimax but the Max X I saw on the I don't know, like what are they better, are they worse, do they I don't know. I mean,
I think the spring-loaded terminals on a subwoofer are just fine, but those old school terminal cups with the two little black and red plastic you push down to get the wire in, that's That's inexpensive for a reason.
And that it's very limited on like what gauge wire you can get. You usually
Yeah.
can't get much bigger than like 16 gauge.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. We have a challenge to see if somebody can get a 12 gauge into one of those.
Oh, jeez.
Submit your photos on Instagram.
I can do it. I'll just cut most of the wire out, though.
It's a 12 gauge when it meets the cup, but it's only like 14 when it goes in. Or
Yeah, when it goes in, it's
18,
14.
Yeah.
It's definitely one of those deceptive. On the outside looks much bigger, but then you're like, oh, okay, that's not really what I thought it was going to be. All right. So yeah, I'm a big fan of changing out the terminals, and I do think that DIYers need to learn more about some of the higher end brands to be able to bring some of these to the DIY world. I think the challenge there most of the way is how do you get other people to be able to build them? Because it doesn't matter if you come up with like a really great design if people don't have the ability to recreate it.
Well, emulate it. You look at it for the same reason why we go to, like, if you guys are into cars and you've ever test driven a race car on a racetrack and then gone home to drive your like Honda or something, you're just like, oh, this piece of it's like you go to reference the experience of driving in something high performance. The same way you go to an audio show to listen to a system that's as best a hotel can show you. But you listen to it for what the audio can kind of sound like. But then you draw the experience, you draw some knowledge away from that experience and try to emulate it, doing it on your own, like, and acknowledge what parts and used how make the significant difference to an acoustic or a sound performance. That's all it is. There's no really like this is right, this is wrong, this is whatever. Some of the science is very, very clear. It's not subjective at all. You just look at for what works and emulate it in a way to suit your own needs.
Don't tell anyone that, because some people don't believe in science. By the way, this is the comment of the night. Reverse TARDIS. I love that. If you guys are familiar with Doctor Who. And you know what a TARDIS is. No, you guys don't. Well, Doctor Who travels with
the Time Lord from Gallifrey.
No, he travels through a British old telephone booth, but it looks like a telephone booth on the outside, but when you get in, it's huge. It's really big. So he said it's the reverse TARDIS for like when we were
bigger on the inside than on the outside.
Bigger on the outside
than on the inside.
Oh, okay. Right. Yeah, so the opposite. Anyway, forget it. If you have to explain it, it doesn't really work as well. Take your food.
Yeah.
We'll keep that in mind. Regular guy audio. Luckily, I know you're joking. All right. So what is one thing, Kanga, that you think we could learn DIY from hi-fi? What is one thing, like if you had to say, this is the one thing I think someone should really take away, what do you think it is?
If you're for DIY, what I aspire, like I was mentioning the emulation thing, having, if you've gotten any kind of speaker, we've talked about it, if you see the cross sections of speakers and how the bracing is put, and you do some of that, that blasphemy science. if you do some of the like the wavelength measurements, and you understand the resonances, and you understand like a little bit of what's going on there, and you look at across any brand or all brands for how, like, what are they all doing kind of similar? Like, why are the tweeters so close to the woofer? Like, what's going on there? Or why are some of the tweeters like asymmetrical on the cabinets? Or if you've opened them up and taken woofers out and looked at the bracing, like what's the bracing? Where is it? What's the angle? Why are there curved cabinets? How does acoustics work? That's what I draw away from high end, because they're spending a lot of money making it look fancy and overpricing them. But what are they doing acoustically, or doing to the materials or the drivers to change the acoustics of it? And then is it really hard to do, DIY curved cabinets? Get a form, bend the material, try it out,
Well, you don't even have to get a form. Just get a router and a template bit, and create one piece that has the curve you want, and then just start templating all the other ones. You can do that. It's work, but you can do it. Justin, I think you would agree with this because I know what your profession is, but we as DIYers and even audiophiles, it doesn't matter really where you fall on the spectrum, we hear things that we automatically agree with, even though we don't know the data that backs it up and if it's true or not. So for example, polyfill. Does polyfill, when you add it to a box, does it make the speaker act as if it's in a larger box? Or if we offset the tweeter, does it really affect the diffraction, and how much? If we add this bracing in, what does it really do to the resonance with inside the box? Those types of things that I feel like a lot of times with DIY, and I get this a lot on the channel where people are saying, hey, you did it wrong because you didn't do this. And I'm like, no, I didn't do it wrong. You just don't understand what you're talking about. But I don't want to say that to you. So I don't really know how to get that point across. But I think there's some truth behind that with that testing.
Well, and there's, we're talking about a complicated system, right? There's a lot that goes into making any complicated system work. So, like for example, we were talking earlier about the pros and cons of offsetting the tweeter versus having the tweeter right above the woofer in like a bookshelf speaker. Okay, that you want to offset it because of the baffle diffraction. Well, but if you offset it, it might have an impact on the sound stage. So it's a question of what are all the various parts that make the system work. And I can't think of any examples outside of audio that aren't like politically contentious or anything. I don't want to get any political trouble. I mean,
Kanga already started that earlier with his ear comment. His ear comment.
I'll go away. I can take the blame, and you guys are good.
Well, I mean, it's like this, there's just too many things in the world that are far too complicated for simple explanations, right? And what is it that makes a speaker sound good? Well, a lot, right? There's a lot that goes into it. And for example, the one you were showing earlier that angled the entire enclosure back on some feet in order to get the time alignment right. And I'm sitting here looking at this going, that's actually a very clever way to get the time alignment right. And one thing that Nick talks about in some of his videos is this concept called the Z offset. And so basically the idea is the woofer and the mid are at a different place, front to back. And
yeah.
Right. So you measure them both, you sum that, you use that information and throw that into the crossover software in order to get the crossover right. And that's tricky. And most people look at a crossover and their introduction to a crossover is, oh, hey, I found a chart somewhere on the internet that says if I want, this crossover frequency, I'm using this ohm driver, here's what I use. And it's like, yeah, that's not really how it works because that's just too simple. For example, what is the impedance of a speaker? Different at every frequency, right? A 4 ohm driver. Okay. It's 4 ohms at one frequency, right? That's, I don't know how they get those numbers, how they decide what makes for a nominal impedance. It's probably just measuring the voice coils and rounding to something, but there's more to it than that, right? There's just more to it than that. And that's the thing to remember. There's always more to it than that.
Yep.
Yeah.
The science is pretty deep.
Oh, good. There are, I was going to say, there are certain tweeters that's not entirely accurate, like ribbon tweeters, but I know what you're saying.
So here's for sure.
Yeah, well, definitely. And I'm only trying to be problematic with you. But all right, so here's Snake Oil. He said, hey, there's a few commercial speakers, mostly vintage, that are actually very good, but they swim in a sea of rubbish and it's hard to afford them. So I'm going to skip past the whole mostly vintage, but I want to talk about commercial and DIY. I don't care if you're talking about commercial and DIY. There is a lot to choose from, and there are a lot that are not good. I have a pair right here that are literally the worst speakers I've ever heard in my life. They're called Mookie. They're terrible. They have a built-in amplifier. I've never shown them really on the channel. They asked me to do a review on them, and I refused because they are so bad. And I told them that. I just said, look, they're terrible. I can't do a review on them. You're not going to like the review. But then they kept pushing me to do a review, so now I just tell everyone how terrible they are because that's what they want me to say. So, all right, here you go. They're terrible. Don't buy them.
You asked for it.
No, I always treat companies with respect, and I tell them, hey, look, if I don't like the product, I'm just going to tell you, and then you can decide how to proceed. So, anyway, to make a long story short, those are awful. But if I'm looking on Amazon, because a lot of people are ordering down on Amazon, I wouldn't know that. And I think it's hard to navigate through that sea, no matter whether you're looking for a commercial grade. And I think that's why you look for designers and brand more than anything else. So speaker designers that you trust, like if you've heard that they've designed good speakers and you trust that, start building them. I think I build some pretty good speakers. I know Jeff Bagby does as well. Paul Carmody has some good designs. There's a lot of great designers out there. DIY Sound Group has some great designs. There's so many, I couldn't name them. We've mentioned Andrew Jones before. I think Andrew Jones is a very good designer. I would take pretty much any speaker that he designed in the price, because they're typically designed well for that price point. Not
if
saying
you like his signature sound,
correct,
go for it. Because there's my 2 channel. I'm the other way. I like my highs tilted up rather than subdued.
Yeah. That's interesting. Andrew Jones as well. Justin, you were just talking about time alignment. He uses almost always what Europeans call concentric drivers and what we call coaxial drivers because of that time alignment. Mm-hmm. So he'll have like a mid-woofer with a tweeter in there. KEF does too as well. They have that one speaker that is I believe, a concentric driver.
Yep. Techniques has got one. Paradigm just did one in their center channels.
Oh, did they? That's that's smart to do in a center channel. Aaron's Audio Corner is going to be doing a center channel. I didn't see it come out yet, so if it did come out, then I missed it.
Shootout, yeah, it came out.
Where he talks about the different designs and how they. Oh, well, then you guys should go watch that along with me. I'm going to go watch it tonight because I didn't know it came out yet.
Yeah,
Parts Express has one of those concentric drivers as well. It's sitting in this boombox back here behind me.
Nice. The CX120.
I mean, so they're out there and they're affordable, and you can give them a try.
Yep.
Yeah, here it is.
Way to get that sound like in a different kind of presentation. You don't have this problem with aligning and positioning, whatever. Just use a concentric. Yep.
Yeah, and a lot of people see, like, they usually use a horizontal MTM, which is a woofer or mid woofer. MTM stands for mid tweeter, but mid tweeter mid, basically MTM, right? Mid tweeter mid. So anyway, but the problem is an MTM is really great when you turn it this way because you get a really wide horizontal response. But when you flip it this way and an MTM, so it's horizontally like most center channels, it does a really good job going up and down, but a terrible job going left to right. So if you're sitting directly in front of it, it sounds great. But if you're sitting off to the left or to the right, it sounds terrible. And so what a lot of people are doing, like Kenga's saying, is they put a concentric driver in there. So now you don't have to worry about it. And then if you put woofers on the either side, you still don't really have to worry about that. So now you get a much better coverage. Or what other people will do is they'll put a tweeter and a mid, like a bookshelf, right on top of each other, and then the 2 woofers on the side. So I think there are things that you can look at commercially and look at it and be like, I don't think I want that design because it's been designed for convenience over functionality.
Yeah. Well, the woofer tweeter woofer or mid woofer tweeter mid woofer horizontal is usually in more budget line series. Like I've looked across the board, and a lot of them across multiple brands will only have this. Like, well, the tweeter will be asymmetrical, so the tweeter's at the top of the cabinet when it's horizontal. But you're still getting this off-axis sort of like twist and comb filtering if you're using it for home theater, because when you move off of the center line, then you're losing that timing between the left and right woofers. So my favorite, the shared screen that I put up, is this woofer, and then a mid and tweeter in the middle, so that your high and mid frequencies, where the wavelengths are shorter, stays on axis when you move left to right, and your 2 woofers on the side have this acoustic center that's not really affected when you move around. So you maintain your sound staging from the center, and you don't lose that imaging because the tweeter and the woofers are right in the middle. And normally this configuration is better if you can use it. Like SVS has it in both of their centers, which is cool, even at a budget brand, kind of, comparatively.
No,
next
you're
to
right.
this thing anyways. But that's where you're going to get your better imaging if you have your tweeter mid in the center for a center channel rather than all drivers horizontal, or use a matching bookshelf as the center.
Yeah,
So
or if you do an acoustically transparent screen, which is the best way to do it. Guys, by the way, I'm going to be building a DIY acoustically transparent screen on the channel. So if you want to know how to do that, make sure to subscribe. Then you can put whatever you want back there. You can put a huge tower back there. No one will know. And honestly, Kenga, have you done, I know you did a projector. Did you ever do an acoustically transparent?
I haven't, because at the time I wasn't, like, nothing's really been permanent, like an apartment living and moving around and still designing. Like, there's too many changes, but that's one of the things that I wanted to do next. If I was going to do it, I actually wanted to make a curved acoustic transparency. Of course, I'm going to make it harder for myself where I have to build the curved frame and then stretch it the right way. But
and you're supposed to use like you're supposed to put something on the lens too, right? To also help it morph the screen correctly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like that's like using curved gaming screens.
Yeah, I have one right here in front of me. You can't see it. You can't see it.
And like once you see like that kind of experience, you get that kind of perspective on what you're doing for immersion and gaming and the visual aspect where the lighting is consistent across it, depending on what panel or screen you're using. It's just this little bit extra, like we're talking about with audio, right? You want to go to that next level. A curved screen done with all of these different types of changes with the lens gets you that next little bit. Is it worth it? Well, that's personal.
I will tell you that an acoustically transparent screen is definitely worth it if you use a projector for a couple reasons. You were talking about how that just envelops you with the curved screen, and you're right. I have one right here. It's a 32-inch gigabyte. I love it. And when you go with that curved, it doesn't matter if you go curved, but when you go acoustically transparent, I should say, all the voices are behind the screen. Everything's behind the screen. You don't see any speakers. And it's literally like when someone, if you have it set up properly, when they're talking, it feels like it's coming right from their mouth, like they're in there. It's a completely different experience. And every time I had people over at my old house where I had an acoustically transparent screen, they were like, this is amazing. And you just couldn't, it's a different experience. It's awesome. I love it.
Yeah, it's like our ears are sensitive enough to pick up on directivity, which is why I dampen everything. Everything is really, I know that they say you can over dampen, it doesn't sound right. Well, I think that's subjective too. Like I could survive in an anechoic chamber for a long while where other people say it drives them crazy. Like, well, that's subjective. So having the directivity in your horizontal plane, well, even vertical now, with like gaming audio, especially because it's a different type of experience. When you're gaming, it's live mixed. It's not programmed by the engineers. It's not specific to what's on screen as a movie. You're a passive observer to a movie. But when you're gaming, everything is happening like in real. Like when you move to face a sound, it moves across the screen and lines up with you. You want that to be as accurate as possible. So I don't know really where engineers for movies place things, whether it's actually behind the screen or left and right of the screen. Like when
you mean the timing?
Moves. Yeah, I'm not sure 100%, but it does create a completely different experience because like your center channel is below your screen, the face is up in the middle. Your ears can pick that up. So
yeah, you get to pick the perfect placement for it. And I think that's kind of the thing. When it's behind the screen, it can be right at ear level, coming right out of their mouths basically when it's going. And that's kind of the cool thing for me. So I love acoustically transparent screen. And I'll tell anyone, if you have one, if you have the chance to do one, do it. You don't have to have a lot of space back there behind the screen. So you don't have to take a lot of space. In fact, you're not losing anything really, because if you put your speakers in front of the screen, basically, they're going to be sticking out the same amount. So you might be losing a foot or two, like where the center is. Like I'll probably do 30 inches back there. So 2.5 feet. Just because I want to make sure that I have enough room if I ever decide to do rear ported speakers. It's not going to be too problematic, because that would be really the only time. Or if I did something like bipolar, like definitive technology, which I'm not planning on doing. But if I did, that would be another issue where I'd have to have that those would be speakers you would hate, because those speakers are all designed about bouncing reflections around the room. All right, guys, we're out of time. I just realized it. We're like 10 minutes over. I know.
So we tend to wrap these things up by asking what all do we have going on our channels. Kanga, you've got a YouTube channel. You got a few videos up, I've noticed. What do you have coming up? Well, what should people tune in to watch?
As we were mentioning a little bit before the show, I have this small project going. It's an ongoing project where I am trying to put together an insane sort of like 9.4.6 surround system.
That'd be awesome.
The 4 subs are those 15 DIY that I was talking about, where regular guy audio is going to walk me through some of those specs. It's been
Sweet.
Awesome about that and encouraging. I'm one of them watching your guys' videos of the woofer showcase. You were talking about the new the Dayton audio one.
Yeah.
So I was watching that. I'm like kind of getting all my elements together. But yeah, I got a project going on with Monolith brand, where I've got their speakers set up now where I'm using centers as LCRs, and I've got more things coming. And to mention, they actually have a concentric driver satellite coming out that's supposed to like really kick ass.
See, and this is the thing that kind of excites me about Monoprice. They're a budget brand that is usually good for their price point. So that's one of those things that I think is neat. I'm going to share the screen real quick because I want to share what you're talking about as far as the center. I'm thinking these are the ones. I could be wrong. These are the ones, right?
Nope.
No, these aren't. Well, so these are the THX ones, but one thing that you'll notice is the center, the orientation like we were talking about earlier.
Yep.
And then if you take a look at the left and right, you see the orientation of the mid and tweeter are up and down. The mid and the tweeter always stay up and down. So although this is the exact same speaker per se, the difference is, how they orient that mid and tweeter there.
That looks to have that up-firing THX speaker there.
Yeah, the mid.
It's like Atmos.
Mid bookshelf. Yes. Yeah, mid tower that they got. I can show. Let me look. I know we're over time.
But you know what? We'll just. Why don't you go and find it? When you find it, we'll share it. But the other thing is too, just subscribe to Kanga's channel, right? Audio System Specialist. Just go ahead and subscribe to that, because when it comes out, you'll be able to see that, and I'll be interested in that, because I usually am pretty big fan of most of the things that Monoprice puts out. So, for the price, they're priced appropriately, I should say, typically. And typically, when I say priced appropriately, it actually means that they're priced well, because I don't think a lot of things are priced appropriately. All right, Justin, what about you, man?
I dropped a video yesterday, another amp dyno, the second one in a row. This time I found a real bargain on Amazon. I'm not that familiar with the brand. It's Recoil Audio. This amp was $100 when I bought it, and they've knocked $5 off the price since then. And you'll have to watch the video to see how much power it did. And I was a little surprised by that. So that was yesterday's video.
That was rated at 500? 500
What's
watts?
That?
Wasn't rated at 500 watts?
It was rated at 600 watts, 1 ohm. So
yeah, I'm so surprised it did 5,000 watts. That was crazy.
Didn't quite do 5,000, but definitely did very well. So definitely worth checking out so you can see how it did. And one thing that I always do, I've done 2 amp dyno videos. One thing that I do in my videos that no one else does is I go through the trouble to hook them up to a subwoofer just to show what you actually get when you're running it on a subwoofer. And there's a million reasons why the power that goes through a resistive load in a dyno is just not what you get in the real world. So don't like their RCAs very much. Haven't tried their RCAs. Only ever tried their amplifiers so far.
No, he's talking about Monoprice.
Oh, Monoprice. Okay.
I think. Yeah. I'll tell you.
Who knows? Either way, they Recoil has some RCAs for sale too. So, that's what I did this last time. I'm not going to do an amp dyno in next week. I've got next week's video already uploaded for my patrons, so my patrons can see the next week's video. It's a video on what gain overlap is. So that's something you see people talking about, but no one ever actually explains what the hell it is. And so if you actually want to know what the hell gain overlap actually is, you can know right now by joining me on Patreon, or you can wait a week and find out.
So that's the center. Okay. That's nice because it's in a waveguide, so it can really go either direction, really.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it should still, but yeah, gotcha.
Really, really, really nice. And you see how that the waveguide, you see the distances here? This one's a little bit bigger than this one.
Yeah,
So the
yeah.
tweeter's a little bit above center when it's in its correct orientation.
Here I am with my mouse trying to scroll up the screen. Like, this isn't working.
I got but they put the chart right on the page for you.
Which is great, except...
I mean, I don't know how they tested it, but yeah.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic, except that, yeah, like, how much smoothing is on there, how are they testing it or whatever. But I mean, as far as that response, it's really great. It's a really great response.
So I have them set up like this. That's a panoramic shot of my room.
That's pretty cool.
Oh, wow.
Is that Warframe or what is that?
Sweet.
Destiny 2.
Destiny 2. Oh, you know what? I have that.
I
never played
a little bit of Warframe too.
That is sweet.
That is really nice.
Yeah, that's a little bit dark, but I like it dark.
I like it
So
dark.
I'm really against gloss finishes. I don't like them like reflecting back at me, so I like the fact that these are a little bit matte. It's like a vinyl wrap, black ash or whatever you want to call it. And you see my 2-channel there in the front. Those are the Sonus Fabers that I use for 2-channel.
I like that. They're beautiful speakers.
My phrase to all my friends is, look, your music deserves better. And I like having a really good, like more detail on my music listening because I am familiar with a song multiple times I'm listening to it. I can tell if like Eric Clapton sounds like he's got a cold, it doesn't sound right. So I spent more on the 2-channel, but for theater, I'm going all out with the best budget that I can get. And like I said, they have a new speaker coming out in their THX range that's a satellite, that's a concentric driver, 5 1/4 concentric driver as a satellite that I'm going to use for height speakers.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. I actually might look into those to test as Dolby Atmos height speakers, because that is one thing that a lot of people are looking for. I really also want to try to maybe design some with a concentric. Maybe I did that already with some Eminence ones. I'd like to kind of come up with a different way to do that. I'm not sure how to do that yet. So I don't have much coming out on my, well, actually, no, I'm going to try to be putting out a lot of videos this week. This week I'm not going to be doing much more than putting out videos. If you've been on the forum, and you should be, if you're not on the forum, get over there and get on the forum, toydsdiyaudio.com. I am been working on the Audience 212s. Now, what the Audience 212 are basically a version of the JTR style speakers. They're similar to JTR. They're an MTM. They use two 12-inch SB Audience woofers, and they're going to be using a 1-inch compression driver and a 90 by 90 horn. So it's really interesting. It's really cool. You can take a look. I have all kinds of pictures going on. We have some people talking about that. I will be working on those this week. I'll be spending a lot of time getting those done, getting the crossover done, but these have come out really good, and I think that you guys are going to be really interested in the results of these. So the cool thing too is, because of the way the horn is oriented, we can actually turn that speaker on its side. So if you don't have an acoustically transparent screen like you should have, just kidding, then you can still use it as a center channel sideways. And there's going to be a couple different box designs if you want to use it as a center, but you don't want the port on one side. You can put a port on, either side. You have that option as well.
Looks really cool.
I'm hoping to have some time this week to work on another project as well. And so this will be, videos on down the road a little further. I usually share these with my patrons first, but y'all get a sneak peek today because I was in the mood to show off some pictures. I've got some drivers or some enclosures coming together that are really neat. There's this really cool guy who will sell CNC flat packs of these custom designs. And I'm really excited about this because this is supposed to be the most awesome bookshelf speaker ever. Apparently, it's so good you don't need a subwoofer. So I'm gonna find out.
You're not telling anyone what they are yet, huh?
No, you'll figure it out.
No, I have an idea.
I did a little dry fit today, and they come out nice. So
I'm excited to see whatever this is finished because
I'm impressed right here with how nice the recess is that was CNC cut. That was pretty smooth.
Yep.
yeah.
That's
Now
nice.
maybe you'll get a CNC now.
Yeah, maybe I'll need one. Yeah. Right now I don't have a place to put a CNC. If I have a place to put one, that'd be nice.
No, that would make a big difference, wouldn't it?
Yep.
All right, guys, we're gonna let you guys go. I'm gonna head out. I know Justin is headed out. Man, you even have like cutting open the box and all kinds. You have a unboxing of this. Wow, you went all out on this build. All right, guys, we're gonna let you go. We're really excited. We can't wait to have next week. Next week, Justin's gonna go over his favorite recipes and how to cook them. So that'll be very interesting.
Yeah, you open the box and you put it in the microwave and you pour milk on it, and that's about it.
So if you guys want to do that, make sure to subscribe to his channel because we'll be on his channel next week. He's going to go over his famous Kraft macaroni and cheese recipe. And I have no idea.
We need to do what can you cook on this on the top of this amplifier video?
Or actually, what can we mix on the subwoofer?
Yeah, like you could use the subwoofer to mix the ingredients, and then you can pour it on an amp plate and see how long it'd take to cook.
This is a great idea. Let's start some grilling. We're going to put a bunch of seasoning inside the middle of the parabolic bowl on the MX series and just mix all the spices together by playing our favorite song.
You could put the port right on the bottom of the grill where the air is, and see if you can kind of get
some flames.
See if you can make the fire a little hotter by using the wind from the port.
It'd be even sadder. It's like if you're have a propane grill or something, it actually blows them out. All right, guys, we're gonna let you go. I'll see you later on Toad Steel Audio, and I'm out.